Maturity isn't found in conquering adversity, but in the quiet strength to embrace the pain that comes with it. This idea, echoed by the philosopher Albert Camus, asks us to imagine Sisyphus condemned for eternity to push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down. Sisyphus could still, in Camus' view, find a steadfast calm on his endless journey. This isn't mild resignation. It's about reconciling with the inherent paradox of existence. Maturity is that moment of clarity when you truly see life for what it is. A path filled with countless disappointments. It's the rejections, the moments of being overlooked, the relationships that don't align, the things that break and are lost, and the sudden misfortunes that feel like the boulder tumbling back down just as you reach the summit. You will feel the sting of pain, the confusion, and you might even cry until you have no tears left, screaming at the unfairness of it all. Yet, you can still choose to accept this pain as an inevitable part of your journey and live with it consciously. As Eastern wisdom teaches, life is like green tea. It only releases its true fragrance after enduring the boiling water and blending with it. When you can stop demanding the world to conform to your will. When you can fully embrace suffering, you will discover true freedom within imperfection itself. Hi, warm greetings to all of you. Welcome back to BION, the channel that shares knowledge about holistic personal development through great books. Today, BION would like to share with you the classic novel, Jane Eyre, by the renowned British author Charlotte Brontë. As you journey through this book, you will understand that a truly mature person is someone who can eliminate every obstacle from their path, but rather, someone who learns to accept all the suffering when life as trials continue to defy their wishes. But how can we distinguish between positively accepting reality and merely enduring it with passive resignation? How can we live in that boiling water and still release our fragrance into the world? Jane Eyre reveals 3 inner wisdoms on how to fully embrace suffering, guiding you on the path to genuine maturity and empowering you to live a life of freedom and self-created happiness, even within imperfection. Now, let us listen together. To fully accept suffering, we must begin with the wisdom of self-respect. An outbreak of typhus claimed the lives of Jane's parents. At the age of 13, she was left an orphan and taken in by her uncle. But things grew even worse. Just a year later, the only person who truly loved her uncle de Villeneuve. Life had snatched away Jane's final ray of light. From then on, she was bullied in her uncle's own mansion. Her cruel and violent cousin tormented her constantly, while her aunt, always defending her son, treated Jane like a thorn in her eye. Jane often had to hide in corners of the house to escape her cousin's abuse. Every time he came near, her entire body would shrink in fear. Despite Jane's efforts to be cautious in every move, she was still beaten and scolded by her aunt, day after day. One time, after being struck on the head by her cousin until she bled, Jane finally leapt up to fight back. Yet her aunt, without any concern for reason or fairness, immediately locked her inside a room rumored to be haunted. The little girl screamed and begged to be released until she fainted, but her aunt showed no mercy and kept the door tightly locked. In that household, even the servants could scold her as they pleased. Jane lived like a hunted mouse, suffering daily in an environment of injustice and merciless psychological oppression. The servants advised her, "Don't think that just because you live here, you can be like us. You must learn obedience and submission. Only then will life be easier." But Jane did not choose to follow that path. In the moment of absolute terror inside that dark room, she experienced a profound realization. The cause of her suffering was not that she was unworthy, but simply that she did not belong in that place. Instead of blaming herself or falling into despair, Jane recognized that the injustice surrounding her was not her fault. She understood that suffering does not define one's worth, and she was fully deserving of kindness. Thus, Jane refused to passively endure or become a tool for her aunt's cruelty. In truth, accepting suffering does not mean submitting or turning oneself into a spiritual slave. It means preserving one's Self-respect. Why then, in today's modern society, are psychological conditions like chronic stress, insomnia, and self-isolation so widespread? One of the main reasons lies in how we react to adversity. When confronted with injustice or disappointment, many fall into a downward spiral of despair, helplessness, and self-blame. They repeatedly ask themselves bitter questions. Am I being treated this way because I lack privilege? Why is he or she so unfair to me? Why don't my parents understand me? Why is my child turned out this way? These unanswerable questions only add to the psychological burden, trapping us deeper in helplessness, self-reproach, or passive endurance of toxic relationships. Such cases exist everywhere in this world. The woman who suffers abuse from her husband, yet cannot leave, believing her children need a father or fearing that divorce would mean her own failure. Over time, these women lose their self-respect and live in fear and dependence. Or the young men and women who endlessly sacrifice themselves for partners who constantly demand control, just to cling to a false sense of security. Or those who flee from their past failures in career or love, numbing themselves with cigarettes, alcohol, all-night gaming sessions, or endless shopping sprees, only to temporarily forget their suffering. But in truth, they are like climbers trapped in a snowstorm, too afraid to move forward lest they fall into the abyss, yet unwilling to find the way back. They don't realize that accepting suffering is not lying down to die, but the courage to untie the knots that bind their own hearts. So many of us have once been like Jane, locked away in a dark room of fear. Each of us carries our own suffering and pain, but Jane chose to rise up, while countless others out there are slowly losing the voice of their own hearts. Nietzsche once warned, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." If you choose helplessness, if you allow things outside your control, cruel people, and harsh circumstances to continue breaking your heart, you are in fact destroying your own life. Dear friend, you must know this. Suffering cannot define or determine your life. It is how you face it that shapes who you truly are. Just as a river cannot stop the rocks in its path, but can choose to bend and keep flowing, you too can let adversity and suffering forge you into a stronger version of yourself, not a spiritual slave silently enduring in darkness. For just as Jane proved, the soul needs love, and you too will rise, move forward, and claim it. You are not alone. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of respect. To fully accept suffering, you need the wisdom of courage to break free from your illusory comfort zone. After awakening from the darkness of her past, Jane made the decision to attend Lowood School. However, this charitable institution, meant to be a refuge, was instead a place of harsh control and the food served was often spoiled. The dormitories were perpetually cold, and the moral lessons preached were steeped in hypocrisy. The standards for work were mercilessly strict, and ideological enslavement was a part of daily life. In this oppressive environment, many young lives were tragically lost to disease. And yet, Jane did not succumb to despair. A deep-seated longing to live and thrive burned within her, compelling her to choose a path of resilience. She dedicated herself to studying and reading, determined to rise above the adversity surrounding her. She learned French, mastered painting, and practiced music skills that would later empower her to become an excellent teacher at the very school that once oppressed her. But a turning point came when Miss Temple, the only kind and humane teacher at Lowood, departed. It was then that Jane realized the so-called peace and stability she had found within the school's walls were nothing more than a psychological cage. She decided to post an advertisement seeking new employment, a bold move that meant surrendering the stability she had fought so hard to secure. Many others at Lowood chose to remain, paralyzed by their fear of the unknown world outside. This is a struggle familiar to many of us who find ourselves stuck in our own forms of suffering, unable to escape. Perhaps it is because you have discovered a false sense of security that you are reluctant to let go of. You might despise your job, feeling your core values are being stifled and your potential is withering away in a soul-crushing workplace. You might feel trapped in an unhappy marriage, where the connection has faded and resentment has taken its place. Perhaps you have lost your true self in the process of pleasing others, sacrificing your own needs for their approval. You may have abandoned your passions just to meet the expectations of your family or to keep up with the relentless pace of society. You might be enduring this suffering simply to maintain a state of being that feels familiar. But when you consistently ignore the desperate cries of your own heart, that inner voice, urging you to love yourself, to honor your own life, and to seek genuine fulfillment, it means you have found some justification to console yourself, some reason to remain within that deceptive safe zone. Ask yourself honestly, what is that reason holding you back? What is it that you are so deeply afraid of? The renowned psychologist Erich Fromm once observed, "The fear of freedom makes people choose to become slaves." Many people do not dare to let go of their current circumstances in order to change their reality. In truth, they fear the risks of the unknown so profoundly that they willingly trade their freedom for what they perceive as stability and familiarity, even though this reality may be slowly eroding their soul and wearing down their body. A significant number of people still convince themselves that holding on to a draining job or persisting in a toxic relationship is simply their responsibility as a mature adult. But in reality, this is not maturity. It is a surrender to suffering. Jane Eyre, once again, shows us that true maturity requires a profound kind of courage, the courage to step decisively out of the comfort zone, to stop clinging desperately to the familiar, and to use suffering as a lens through which we can see the truth. That truth is that the safety found in familiarity is often an illusion, while true, lasting freedom is won only through self-respect and the courage to act. Just as a seed must crack open its hard shell in order to sprout and grow toward the light, a human being must break free from the shell of false safety in order to discover true happiness and find a deeper meaning in life. Upon leaving her former school, Jane was fortunate to be offered a position as a governess at Thornfield Hall. It was there she met the love of her life, Rochester, the master of the grand estate. As to kindred souls, they found themselves drawn closer and closer together. However, just as they had surmounted every obstacle and were preparing to walk down the aisle, a shocking truth that Rochester had concealed for years came to light. His wife was still alive, confined to the attic of the very mansion they inhabited. He pleaded for Jane's understanding, explaining that he had been deceived into the marriage years ago, completely unaware that the woman he wed had a history of severe mental illness, prone to violent attacks on anyone she encountered. She had to be kept in isolation for her own safety and that of others. In the aftermath of this revelation, Rochester proposed that he and Jane escape to a secluded island in the Mediterranean to begin a new life together. Yet, Jane refused to become the other woman. She would rather forsake a life of immense wealth and comfort than compromise her personal dignity, her principles, and her integrity. At the break of dawn, before anyone else was awake, she departed without a single possession to her name. Jane accepted the hardship that awaited her as an essential part of her journey and inevitable trial of life. This moment marked a profound turning point in her spiritual growth. Leaving Thornfield penniless and destitute, she was soon forced to beg for food. Nearly succumbing to hunger and the biting cold, she was miraculously rescued by her cousin, St. John, a man she had never met before. Through her own capability, Jane soon secured a position as a village school. With her sharp intellect and unwavering character, she quickly earned the respect of everyone in the community. St. John, who was not only intelligent and devout, but also strikingly handsome, began to pursue her. Yet, Jane quickly discerned that his repeated proposals were not born of genuine love, but of a sense of duty. He sought a suitable wife to accompany him on his religious mission abroad. She firmly refused him, asserting that love must be authentic and freely given, not a form of blind sacrifice. Around this time, she mysteriously heard Rochester's voice calling her name across the miles. Compelled by a force she couldn't explain, she returned to Thornfield to find him. But what awaited her was a scene of utter devastation. The grand mansion was reduced to a blackened ruin, and Rochester himself was a broken man, blinded, maimed, and impoverished. His wife, in a final fit of madness, had set fire to the estate and perished in the flames. In his heroic attempt to save his household, Rochester had lost an arm and nearly all of his sight. By then, Jane was no longer the poor, helpless girl she once had been. She had discovered that her late uncle had left her a considerable inheritance, making her financially independent at last. She could have chosen a life of security and ease. Yet, when she saw Rochester in his wounded and vulnerable state, she felt no pride, no disdain, no fear, and certainly no regret for having turned down St. John. Instead, her heart was filled with a deep, peaceful love, and she knew in that moment that she wished to be Rochester as support and his equal companion. Looking back at Jane Eyre's journey, we cannot help but see that in every circumstance, she chose to embrace suffering as an inevitable part of life. She never collapsed under hardship, nor did she run from adversity. Instead, she transformed it into strength, the very foundation of true and lasting happiness. This strength was derived not only from her unshakable self-respect, her profound self-love, and her courageous willingness to let go, but also from the wisdom of perseverance, a philosophy of neither regretting the past nor fearing the future. When she abandoned her uncle's estate, where she had food and shelter but endured relentless spiritual oppression, she did not regret her decision for a single moment. During the 6 grueling years at Lowood School, a place where she struggled, he had managed to build the foundations of her livelihood. She once again relinquished a false sense of stability without fear of the uncertain future that lay ahead. And when she learned her fiancé already had a wife, she chose the painful path of integrity over the easy path of compromise, demonstrating a profound wisdom that ultimately led her to a love that was truly her own. This message is for you, those who are suffering in your own struggles out there. As children, when we first read Jane Eyre, we may have thought it was simply a fairy tale romance with a happy ending. But as adults, with more life experience, we realize it is also a book of awakening, teaching us to grow, to find calm, to accept, and to live with suffering. When facing adversity, people often advise us to overcome it. But does this mindset unknowingly turn us into someone who only seeks to suppress or escape every source of pain? In truth, trying to destroy or flee from suffering only carries us from one pain to the next. Jane Eyre, the little girl once crushed by fate, showed us a wiser way. Maturity is not about conquering suffering, but about courageously conversing with it. Jane was never reckless, nor did she regret giving her heart sincerely. Instead, she calmly acknowledged the situation and understood Rochester's helplessness. Even though letting go meant her future would be filled with poverty and uncertainty, she chose not to stay out of fear or anxiety. At the end of her journey, when she stood before the man she'd loved no longer whole, she did not regret turning down a perfect marriage with her cousin. Though Rochester was blind and destitute, she still chose him not out of duty, but because she placed sincere love above all practical calculations. And then a miracle happened. Rochester regained sight in one eye and lived to see the child they had together. Jane's life journey teaches us that true maturity does not mean avoiding mistakes, it means daring to live fully, taking responsibility for every choice without regret, and not worrying about a future that has not yet come. Every step of her path was marked by absolute perseverance with her core values. First, giving up material comfort to preserve her dignity and self. Second, choosing the path of growth and learning rather than resignation. Third, letting go of what she had in order to keep her conscience clear. And finally, accepting adversity to live truthfully with herself. So here is my personal reflection for you. When you feel pain rising in your chest, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and tell yourself, I know this pain is an essential part of my journey. I accept it, and I am grateful for its presence. Pain is my strictest teacher, but also my most loyal companion. Thank you for coming, so that I may learn to be stronger, wiser, and more loving toward myself. You need to know that every person you meet and every event that comes into your life has its reason. Do not hate or resent your suffering, because resistance only prevents the wound from healing. Instead, let your pain teach you to love and respect yourself, to be honest with your own heart, to show compassion to others, and to free yourself from the temptations of materialism and the craving for safety. Jane once said, "The lonelier I am, the more friendless I become, the more I must respect myself." If something is unavoidable, then we must learn to accept it. Refusing to accept what fate places before us is a sign of weakness and blindness. Jane's steadfastness was not rigidity, but rather the wisdom of one who truly understands. Real maturity comes when we awaken by being honest with our own hearts, just as Jane herself embraced these core values, enabling her to accept suffering, grow through each experience, and ultimately achieve true freedom. To you, the one carrying pain like a burning fire in your chest, you are worthy of love, kindness, and respect. Though life's lessons may be filled with trials and hardship, wisdom, compassion, and clarity are already within you. Your soul is urging you to awaken. You are strong enough to rise from illusion just as Jane awoke in the darkest night. Thank you for listening. If you found this video meaningful, please share it with someone who may need it. Don't forget to give it a like, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to catch the newest videos each week. Once again, thank you and see you in the next video.